Now please listen to Chapter 2 of this audio. In this chapter, we're going to discuss two main items.
1. The definition of natural hazard and natural disaster. 2. The assessment of strengths and weaknesses and community-based disaster risk management planning.
First, learn the definitions of two important concepts, natural hazard and natural disaster.
What is a natural hazard? A natural hazard is a natural phenomenon that threatens people's lives, health, and property. There are various types of natural hazards, such as storms, floods, landslides, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Vietnam is often affected by storms, floods, and landslides.
Number 1. Storm.
Storm is a cyclonic wind of great intensity affecting dozens of kilometers of land and accompanied by a heavy rain. Wind speeds are divided into 12 levels. Wind speeds from force 6 to force 7 are called low pressures. Wind speeds of force 8 or more are called storms. In Vietnam, storms usually occur between August and December.
Number 2. Torrent and flood.
A torrent is the phenomenon where the level of water in rivers and streams rises suddenly with exceptionally high-speed flow. A flood occurs when torrent water rises so high that it overflows riverbanks, lakes, dams, and piers, and submerges houses, trees, and rice paddies.
Number 3. Landslide.
A landslide is a phenomenon where a mass of land on the side of a river or hill is swept away by heavy rain. Vietnam is also affected by earthquakes and is at risk from tsunamis.
Number 4. Earthquake.
An earthquake is a violent shaking of the ground due to the sudden movement of tectonic plates in the Earth's crust. In Vietnam, earthquakes are rare, but have occurred in some areas.
Number 5. Tsunami.
A tsunami is the phenomenon where an ocean wave tens of meters high is created, which eventually crashes onto the shore with tremendous speed and force, sometimes killing multitudes of people. A tsunami has not yet struck Vietnam, but Vietnam is still at risk due to its long coastline.
We've described several types of natural hazards. Now here's the definition of natural disaster.
A natural disaster occurs when a natural hazard causes major damage to a community that cannot respond effectively with their limited resources. For example, in November 2013, Superstorm Haiyan swept through the center of the Philippines, causing tremendous damage. 8,000 dead or missing, 4 million people's homes destroyed, and material losses estimated in the billions of US dollars. According to Philippine government estimates, reconstruction and recovery from Haiyan will take 5 years.
So what is the difference between a natural hazard and a natural disaster?
A natural hazard is a natural phenomenon which is unavoidable. Whether a hazard becomes a disaster or not depends on the strengths and weaknesses of the community in coping with natural hazards. So assessing the strengths and weaknesses of a community is very important. The results of the assessment can enable the community to plan for natural disasters and minimize their negative consequences.
Now we can talk about strength and weakness assessment and DiCBDRM planning.
First, let's look at some examples of strengths and weaknesses a community, including persons with visual impairment, might have in responding to natural disasters. Some community strengths might be: there are strong bridges leading to the evacuation shelters. There's a solid elevated village hall or solid elevated houses for people to evacuate to in the event of flooding or storm. There are rescue teams properly equipped with vehicles and rescue equipment and proficient in first aid and water rescue skills. Persons with visual impairment frequently listen to a radio so they can hear early disaster warnings. There is solidarity and mutual assistance among villagers. On the other hand, community weaknesses might include there are persons with visual impairment living in lowland areas or in unstable houses, making them vulnerable in the event of a disaster. There are persons with severe disabilities who have no one to help them if an evacuation becomes necessary. Narrow, muddy rural roads flanked by ponds present an evacuation obstacle to persons with visual impairment. Blind people refuse to go to an unfamiliar evacuation shelter where they might be disoriented. The community has no CBDRM plan, so they are passive in responding to an approaching disaster.